Naturally, we do believe that Iran plays a role in what Hamas and the actions that Hamas is carrying out. What we witnessed 2 days ago is the worst massacre of Israeli civilians in Israel's history. The horrors that we have witnessed, it's almost hard to describe them in words. Right now, the number of Israeli casualties is more than 700. The number of injured are in the thousands. We do believe that it's likely that the number of casualties could, of course, increase. We know historically Iran has been a very, very strong supporter of Hamas, has provided Hamas with considerable financial support and other kind of support. And naturally, we do believe that Iran plays a role in what Hamas and the actions that Hamas is carrying out. But I can't provide from the military perspective. I can't provide any additional information beyond that. What we witnessed 2 days ago is the worst massacre of Israeli civilians in Israel's history, and the magnitude of this loss and the sense of tragedy and mourning that the entire country is feeling right now is overwhelming for everyone. And this is something that we have never experienced before, and the horrors that we have witnessed. It's almost hard to describe them in words. And I would almost like to even start at the end and start immediately with some figures that can perhaps give a sense of this incredible loss. So right now, the number of Israeli casualties is more than 700. The number of injured are in the thousands. Hospitals in the south of Israel, not far from the Gaza border, were overwhelmed with the number of injuries that arrived starting on Saturday, and we know that many of those injuries are very, very serious. And so we do believe that it's likely that the number of casualties could, of course, increase. And of course, there's no way not to mention the horror of the dozens of Israelis who were taken as hostages, essentially kidnapped by Hamas, dragged across the border into Gaza, and are now there being held by Hamas. And I have to point out the fact that this was an assault against Israeli civilians. We have seen, and of course we've heard the testimony and stories of people whose parents, whose grandparents, children, innocent civilians who were dragged across the border and are now being held as hostages by Hamas. So the numbers are horrifying and devastating. Certainly for us, but I think anybody anywhere in the world who has been seeing what has happened really unfold before our eyes. In terms of the timeline of events, on Saturday morning, roughly at around 6:30, up to 1,000 Hamas terrorists invaded Israel. Most came by land, but there were, of course, attempts by sea as well as by air. And once entering into Israeli territory, we saw a massacre take place. Terrorists went into more than 30 Israeli communities along the border, some kibbutzim, as we call them. These are residential communities. And once in these communities, they overtook them. They killed people, murdered people who were on the street, perhaps out for an early Saturday morning walk. They went into homes, murdered people in their beds. Others they took essentially as hostages and held them as hostages within those communities. And of course, many others were taken and dragged across the border into Gaza. In addition to this assault on so many residential communities, of course, at this time, we also know that there was a music festival that was taking place. Hundreds of young people enjoying music with their friends who had been out at this festival that was going on through the night and into the early mornings of Saturday The weekend was the last weekend within this holiday period here in Israel, and we simply had young people who wanted to come and enjoy themselves at a festival. And the horror and the devastation is, of course, something that we immediately realized. And yesterday we made the horrific discovery of more than 270 people who simply were killed and slaughtered at this festival. Civilians who were there listening to music. That was apparently the crime that they committed.